What if you uncovered a horrifying curse in your hometown? Once, twice, thrice. Did you know that those are the only words of their type? There's no quadrice or anything of the sort. After thrice, there's nothing. I find it odd that our language doesn't have a word like this for every number. But even odder is that we even bothered to invent thrice at all. It's not a commonly spoken word. Not outside of Wychford anyway. A broken clock is right thrice a day. A spin on a classic saying, yet one with its meaning opaque to outsiders. I invite you to learn of the saying's origin as I walk you through the events that transpired last summer in a place I can never bring myself to go back to. The clock tower stood tall in the British village of Wychford, visible from any street. Not exactly a huge feat when your village only has 6 streets, but it still stood proudly at the centre. It was always able to see you. Lights behind the clock faces illuminated them at night, easy to mistake for the moon at a quick glance of the skyline. Their harsh white glow, a reminder of the passing minute. The hourly chimes echo this, to those even without a direct line of sight. If anything about Wychford was eerie to newcomers, this clock tower was it. To me, though, it was just there to tell me when my shift ended. The local corner store I worked at had a window directly facing this tower. One day, on a Saturday, at precisely 1:07 p.m, the hands stopped moving. I didn't notice until a customer I was serving chuckled slightly. I can't believe it's been 1:07 for nearly an hour, her sarcastic tone still not cluing into what exactly she meant. I didn't clock on to the joke until she showed me her watch and gestured towards the clock tower. Sure enough, it was 2 p.m, yet the tower told otherwise. Well, I guess it'll be right again tomorrow, I joked. Twice if we're lucky. On her way out, she told me she was going to inform Tobias. I'm sure he already knows, but there's no harm in me just making sure. Tobias was the clock keeper, his house attached to the tower. I've never been inside, so I'm not sure whether he technically lived in the tower or next door. I suppose that depends on whether the buildings connect internally. Either way, the tower was his responsibility, as it had been for the past 50 years, since his father tragically died after falling from the tower. At 5 p.m, as I finished work, I heard the familiar 5 chimes, seeming to confirm that the tower had been fixed. I never stopped to realise that the chimes continued to be eerily missing the rest of the day, nor did I look at the tower. In the morning the next day, as I left my house for a walk in the summer heat, I saw that the clock tower still read 1:07, despite hearing the 3 chimes the day prior. My walk always consists of walking down all 6 streets, stopping to say hello to anyone I pass on the way. It's only a 15-minute walk, unless the conversations delay it. On this day, though, the air felt quiet, even for a small village like Wychford. Things felt particularly more melancholy than normal. By the end of my walk, I hadn't seen a single person. That was as I got to the final street, the one that goes right through the centre of our village, right past the clock tower. I could see Rob, Wychford's lone police officer, standing at the doorway. His hat was held solemnly in his hand, a gesture he reserves usually only for church services. By the time I got to the clock tower, he'd gone to sit in his car. I could hear other officers on his radio, confirming that they were on their way to the location. His car window had been rolled down, so I stopped to say hello. Morning. I spoke with care to remove emotion from my voice. I didn't know what had happened or how serious the situation was. If something bad had happened, I didn't want to be the oblivious idiot who walks in and asks, "Why the long face?" He seemed to not even notice me until I'd spoken. "Hey, yeah, morning to you too. Is everything okay?" "Yeah," his words not matching his mannerisms. Well, things will be okay. He looked pale. I didn't know what he had seen, but it had spooked him to his core. Before I even got the chance to ask further, he answered with what he knew I was curious about. We're going to have to announce it soon anyway, so... He stepped out of his car and stood beside me. 3 bodies were just found inside the gears of the tower, twisted and mangled. I froze at the mental image in my head. It was enough to make me feel sick. I couldn't even imagine how he felt. Did they fall in? Who are they? We don't know anything yet. None of them are local residents. I didn't recognise their faces. At least, not what was left of them. We're treating it as suspicious, but until we investigate further, that's all I can say. As the day went on, more information was released. Sketches of their faces were shown, and not a single person said they knew them. Their identities were a mystery to us, yet we still felt shared mourning for their deaths. It was thought to have been a freak accident after checking various cameras and questioning local residents. Nothing suspicious was found. At 4 p.m, the clock chimed 4, though the hands remained motionless. I think by now it's clear where the saying came from. I don't know who was the first to say it, but for these few days, it's all anyone would say when those chimes hit. Well, even a broken clock is right thrice a day. It wasn't exactly a joke, although by definition I suppose it is. No one ever laughed when the words were spoken. It was more like an absurd observation. The statement itself silently asked the question, but how is it possible for a broken clock to be right thrice a day? The next day, more police were in the area. I would have asked Rob what was happening, but he spent most of the day beyond where the public was now allowed to reach, tied up in the whole ordeal. This day sticks in my mind the most, because it was before any of us knew what was truly going on, but we knew enough to draw up theories. A lot of people thought that maybe they'd found more evidence, perhaps even pointing to murder. A crowd of us were on the street of the tower, hoping for someone to inform us of anything. We fell silent at 3 p.m, as 3 chimes played. We went home without any new information, though our questions were partially answered in a town meeting called the next day. Rob stood in front of our small town hall, with officers either side of him. Seeing more than a single police officer in our tiny village still felt surreal. As you all know, 2 days ago, 3 bodies were found in Whitchford Clock Tower. As of now, the identities of these people are still unknown. After a few seconds of silence, Rob continued. Yesterday, many of you noticed higher police activity. It's always best to lay theories to rest before they get out of hand. I can confirm that 3 more bodies were found in the same positions as the previous 3. So far, their identities are also unknown. We locked the tower and surrounding buildings down with police tape and 24-hour police surveillance. Muttering filled the air, but quickly stopped as Rob opened his mouth to speak again. This time, it seemed to take a while for him to get any words out. As of 90 minutes ago, 3 more bodies were discovered. This brings the death count to 9. Oh my God. Those were the only words going through my head. We're treating this as a serial murder investigation. Given how small our village is, we've been permitted to prevent anyone from leaving or entering. If any exception is needed, please talk to myself or another officer and we'll see what we can do. Thank you. As he walked away and back towards the clock tower, an uproar of questions were being yelled at him. They didn't continue for long, as 2 chimes echoed through the streets. It was 2 p.m. Rumours started, of course. We're only human, and it's human nature to speculate. One person thought it was a psychological experiment. There's no bodies, that's why they won't show them. I can handle seeing a bit of gore. They'd show us if it was real. Many started tracking down the original plans for the clock tower, in hopes of finding a secret entrance. How else would those final 3 bodies have snuck past the ongoing investigation? Some would whisper of ghosts, a spirit come to haunt our town, to taunt us, showing us what would happen to us if we don't do its bidding. They were quickly laughed off, but perhaps only out of denial. Everyone had noticed the pattern, of course, as I'm sure you have too. The chimes. They started as 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. Were they counting down? It was the second day of this village-wide lockdown, July 6th. I'd decided to head down to the clock tower at 12:55. At least, as close to it as I could get. But as it turns out, I wasn't the only one with this mindset. The whole village was there. The entire life of our town gathered ironically around the only spot with any recent deaths. Tobias was nowhere to be seen, however. I figured the police were probably talking to him again, trying to get any information that they could. At 12:59, the entire crowd fell silent. We were all waiting for the chime, unsure of what to expect. Our minds all focused on the same thing. The tower, still stuck at 107. The seconds went by, getting us closer and closer to 1 p.m. Have you ever seen a crowd of people physically deflate? Fear and tension leaving the atmosphere as your own mind calms with it. It's fascinating to see, and it's exactly what I saw at 1 p.m. when no chimes were heard. Not a single one. It didn't chime once, nor twice, nor thrice. Only a few minutes went by, and people were already leaving the crowd when Rob stepped out of the tower. He whistled loudly to get everyone's attention. We were all dreading for him to inform us that 3 more bodies had been found. Instead, we learnt that only 1 had turned up. Somehow, this was so much worse than 3, because this one wasn't a stranger. It was Tobias. No more bodies ever showed up after that. A few weeks went by. The lockdown was lifted, and no further evidence was ever found. The clock was eventually repaired, albeit now with no clock keeper. Our atmosphere was the final death. It had become so bleak. It seemed to be over, but the memories would forever be with us, the fear imprinted in our minds. I was at work one day, staring at the now working clock, when a customer walks in and hands me a wallet. This was on the floor outside. I'm not sure whose it is, so I thought I'd hand it in here. I didn't have the time to speak before they left. I opened it up, and my heart sank slightly to see Tobias's face staring right back at me in a picture. I almost didn't notice the note tucked into where the money should be. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't consider this private information, or immediately hand it to the police. Perhaps I was just too curious. Whatever the reason, I read it. The curse of Wychford has found me, as it found my father 50 years ago. Wychford Clock Tower is more than it seems. Dig deep enough, and you'll find rumours of it being an ancient gateway between universes. It is not. Wychford Clock Tower is the opposite. It's the cork in a bottle. It's the lock of a door. Wychford itself is the gateway, and the clock tower keeps ticking by, keeping the will of reality flowing as normal. Should the ticking stop, reality itself won't fall too far behind. It should be maintained and kept working. The clock keeper is the locksmith of our world. All universes have their own. Ours happens to be at the heart of our village. I don't know what entity controls the towers across universes, but I do know that they require a sacrifice every 50 years. I missed my cue. On July 1st, I was supposed to die, along with every clockkeeper in every universe. But I was stupid. I didn't believe what my father had told me. Once the bodies from alternate realities started showing up, I knew I had messed up. These clock keepers had sacrificed themselves, and I was being shown my selfish ways. They were bleeding into our reality as a sign for me to follow them. The countdown, a sign of the end. As I write this, I'm getting ready to jump. The clock needs its keeper. The keeper is the one who holds the sacrificial curse. I'm sorry to do this to you, but whoever is reading this, you are the new keeper. You have 50 years left ahead of you. If anything should happen to you before then, make sure you have someone new appointed. If the curse has no single bearer, I fear the entire village may be its bearer. To the new clock keeper, good luck. I'm ashamed to admit this. I left town the next day.